Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the fourth annual celebration of the founding of the School of Librarianship, the forerunner, of course, to the School of Information. I'm pleased that we can come together as a community and celebrate this occasion once again. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Hany Farid. I am the Associate Dean and Head of School at the UC Berkeley School of Information. I joined the iSchool just 2 years ago in 2019 after having spent 20 years before that at Dartmouth College on the other side of the country. My research focuses on information security, image analysis, and human perception. And later in the program, I'll look forward to presenting some of the things that we've been thinking around the topic of deepfakes with you. Now, while we wanted to have this event in person, of course, this year, we decided to err on the side of caution and celebrate at least with you virtually. I look forward to the day when we can come together and I can meet with you in person. But until then, we're grateful to have the ability to come together virtually at least and celebrate the legacy of the School of Librarianship and take a look at some of the current research of the School of Information. But first, I want to acknowledge and celebrate Professor Emeritus Michael Buckland. It's because of Michael that this annual celebration started in 2018 when we celebrated the 100th anniversary of the founding of the school. Despite his retirement, Michael remains an active and vital member of our community. He continues to publish. His latest book, for example, Ideology in Libraries, California Diplomacy and Occupied Japan, 1945 to 1952, was published just this last year. Michael has been holding this Friday, his Friday afternoon information access seminar for an incredible 31 years. These seminars cover a broad array of topics that often link the school's roots in a library school to current school research and topics. Faculty, students, and alumni from all programs have been invited to present at these seminars, as well as distinguished guests from around the world. It should be noted that Michael's seminars are open to everyone, and some will be held online this year. And if you haven't been to Michael's seminars in the past, or even if you have, I urge you to take advantage of the virtual seminars while this opportunity exists, or of course, come in person with a mask. We'll be putting in the chat a link to the upcoming seminars so you can take a look for yourself. Now, if you couldn't make the first event in 2018, I urge you to check out Michael's presentation from our 100th birthday celebration, which lives on our website. We'll put a link also into the chat for that. The founding of the school came at a time when there were very few municipal libraries in California and no schools of librarianship. The story of some educator activists banded together to make an end run around the administration to found the school is a fascinating and surprising one. We thank Michael for keeping the iSchool's history alive and continuing to highlight the important thoroughness that remains since the library school establishment, like access to information, information organization, and information policy. And now an update on the iSchool. I'm pleased to report that a little over 6 weeks ago, we made the return to in-person teaching. More than 95% of students, faculty, and staff at the university are vaccinated, and the on-campus caseload continues to decrease. I believe the last 2 days were 0 cases per day, and they have been hovering on 1 to 2 cases per day. We've made, of course, a lot of adjustments to ensure a safe return to classrooms, much like we did just over 100 years ago during the Spanish flu pandemic. As you can see here on the slide, despite a gap of 100 years, we see that the same common sense basic mechanisms, masks, remains one of the most effective tools in keeping us safe. For years, we were able to claim being the smallest school on campus, but no longer. We've experienced tremendous growth over the last several years, but this fall has seen by far the largest number of concurrent enrolled students across all of our programs. For those of you who don't know, we have 5 programs: the Ph.D., the MIMS, the MICS, the 5-year and the MIDS program. While a very small percentage of this growth is attributed to deferrable enrollments resulting from the pandemic, the growth we've seen this semester is unprecedented. We have a total of 1,217 students across all of our programs. The growth in our online Master of Information and Data Science program in particular, as you can see here, that's the largest chunk in the graph that you see on the slides, speaks to the demand for professionals in all sectors who are highly skilled in interpreting massive amounts of data to provide usable, in-depth analysis, solve problems, and contribute valuable insights into a highly data-driven world. Our newest degree program, the Master of Information and Cybersecurity program, began classes just in May of 2018. In this program, students not only learn about keeping cyber systems secure, but they learn about the legal and ethical issues pertaining to security, ever-changing cyber risks, government and national security, and other subjects that impact every one of us. The first class was comprised of 14 enterprising students and included people from a variety of fields, including a technical counterintelligence special agent in the Army, a chief technical risk officer at Kaiser, a senior security reporter, and a UC Berkeley IT systems lead. This fall, 230 students have joined the MICE program, and we hope to see additional growth in this area as the demand for highly trained cyber professionals is higher than it ever has been. Many of our graduate students from our cybersecurity and other programs contribute in a variety of ways to our Center for Long-Term Cybersecurity, CLTC. This is a vital research hub that was created in response to a need to look forward and stay ahead of the cyber threats that affect everyone. Last but not least, the Ischool's PhD program has also continued to grow and continues to be the intellectual backbone of our school. This community of scholars engage in interdisciplinary research, represent the school in academic and professional conferences and seminars, and publish and teach. Last year, we have 29 brilliant PhD students enrolled, by far the largest cohort of doctoral students at the iSchool at any one time. Our current doctoral students are studying subjects as varied as data and technology for socio-political advocacy, privacy, biosensing, education, the environment, and music. Later in the program, you will meet PhD student Lucy Lee, who uses natural language processing in her research on textbooks. This leads me to another exciting development, the historic establishment of the Hale R. Varian Doctoral Fellowship Endowment in Information Science. Hale's generous commitment, paired with a campus match from an anonymous donor, has created the first $1 million fellowship endowment in the school's history. As the founding dean of the iSchool, Hale appreciates how our school's interdisciplinary doctoral research helps address some of the biggest problems of information, technology, and human behavior facing societies today. He also understands that the commitment of time and money attributable to entering any PhD program can be an enormous barrier to extraordinary candidates applying for the program. With gifts like Hale's, we are able to make more competitive offers to highly sought after and talented scholars, and for that, we are incredibly grateful. While the Varian Chair is our newest endowment, the Sidney B. Mitchell Scholarship Fund is among the iSchool's oldest. It was established in 1956 to honor School of Librarianship founding dean Sidney Mitchell and provides vital support to our MINS students at the school. And I wanted to mention this special fund because a few of our library school alumni have made significant contributions supplementing it recently. And one of these donors was, in fact, a Mitchell Scholarship recipient herself, and it was wonderful to see how our alumni give back in such a personally meaningful way. We'll further celebrate Sidney Mitchell's legacy this spring when Michael Buckland will discuss his fascinating life and career, and we'll also meet some of Mitchell's fellowship alumni. Stay tuned, please, for more details. And now it is a great pleasure to introduce Lucy Lee, a PhD student at the School of Information and the Berkeley Artificial Intelligence Research Lab. Lucy's research lies at the intersection of people and language. Her background is in computer and information science and is focused on natural language processing and social network analysis. Lucy came to the iSchool from Stanford University. We will forgive her for that, where she received her master's in computer science and her Bachelor of Science in symbolic systems. Lucy will be presenting her work, Content Analysis of Textbooks via Natural Language Processing, Findings on Gender, Race, and Ethnicity in Texas U.S. History Textbooks. Lucy and her collaborators on this research were awarded the best paper by the American Educational Research Association for this pioneering work. Her advisor at the iSchool, Associate Professor David Bamman, says, "I have every expectation that this work will show up on course syllabi exemplifying the best use of NLP in computational social science." Lucy will be taking questions after the presentation. If you have questions for her, please put them in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. And with that, I'll hand it over to Lucy.
Thank you so much. I think I'm going to share my screen with permission.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much for that amazing introduction. So I'm Lucy Lee. I'm a third-year PhD student, and today I'll be talking about the content analysis of textbooks via natural language processing. This was work done with the Stanford NLP Group and Graduate School of Education, and my joint first co-author in this project is Stanford Linguistics PhD student Dora Dembski. Textbooks are the most widely used instructional technology around the world. They convey social and cultural values to students and impact their beliefs about people and ethnicities different from themselves. But textbooks are not neutral, and one research area in education is to understand how people are portrayed in varying ways in these books. Most textbook content analyses rely on people reading and hand coding textbooks. For example, a coding protocol might ask questions about how often a social group is mentioned and whether they're talked about in the context of a topic such as human rights. These traditional methods tend to lack precision and be resource intensive. We focus on textbooks from Texas, which has the second largest student population in the US, with 5.4 million students enrolled in its K-12 public school system in 2017. Texas is a major textbook market for publishers, and so the state has a significant influence on US textbook content. Texas has also been at the center of several controversies. In 2015, a new social studies textbook adoption, approved by their Board of Education a few years before, was launched. This curriculum became the subject of many news headlines, and some articles stated that the curriculum promoted controversial ideas. The goal of our work is to apply NLP, or natural language processing, to textbook data to answer questions that textbook researchers and education care about. We focus on three main research questions, which are inspired by related work in education. Our first question is, how much are different groups of people mentioned in textbooks? Our second question is, how are different groups and individuals described? And our third question is, which topics are prominent in textbooks and how do they relate to groups of people? We focus on American history textbooks purchased in Texas between 2015 and 2017 for middle and high school students. We obtained textbook purchase data from the website of the Texas Board of Education. This data, however, is quite messy as the titles are not standardized and there's a lot of typos. We performed a lot of manual cleanup and disambiguation to standardize all textbook titles. We keep the 15 most widely purchased textbooks, and then we ordered and scanned these books manually, except for 7 books that have PDFs available. We then apply OCR, or optical character recognition, to digitize scanned books. We use the resulting text as our data with very minimal post-processing. To ground what we learn about the text and demographic data, we obtain district-level student demographic information from the National Center of Education Statistics. We also estimate the political leaning of each county based on their 2-party vote shares in the 2016 elections. I want to introduce a running example from one of our textbooks to illustrate our methods and analyses. So here's a passage about Elizabeth Blackwell and her sister-in-laws. Our first research question addresses how often different groups of people are mentioned in textbooks. We applied co-reference resolution, which is an algorithm that groups references to the same person so that they are counted together. We also identified common nouns that designate common words for people, such as pioneer or Mexicans. Our way to do this is to extract all hyponyms of human, person, people, and social group in WordNet, which is a language resource. We extracted all noun heads in our data and manually identified terms that refer to people. We also used named entity recognition to pull out words designated named individuals. We standardized names using their official name from Wikidata and focused our analyses on the top 100 most commonly detected names. Our list of common nouns include over 1,000 unmarked terms such as engineer or family, as well as over 400 terms specifying a demographic, which we determined manually. Some of the nouns also have an adjectival sense, such as Navajo community, and therefore, when looking at a specific mention of a term related to people in text, we also consider whether its adjectival markers are associated with a particular demographic. We also consider cases of intersectionality, such as Black women, which would be categorized as both women and Black. In this talk, we focus on the groups that are most prominent, but it's important to keep in mind that people in real life may identify with multiple categories and ones that are not discussed here. For named entities, we use Wikidata to identify their gender, but we had to identify race using manual inspection because race wasn't always listed for everyone. Unfortunately, we did not have enough data on instances of people with other genders aside from women and men. For example, transgender is only mentioned 3 times. Previous work has emphasized the importance of culturally relevant education, such as students seeing their personal identities represented in school curriculum. This plot compares the percentage of people marked by race or ethnicity across books against Texas student demographics. The red bar for Latinx, which corresponds to Texas students, is much higher than the peach bar for common nouns marked as Latinx in textbooks. This means these students are disproportionately underrepresented in these books. Black people and white people are mentioned the most often in textbooks. White people are actually mentioned more in text than this plot shows. This is because the assumed demographic for most people-related nouns is the dominant group if they're unmarked. For example, if the text discusses farmers, their focus is actually white farmers, even though it's not explicitly stated. This right plot shows percentages for people terms marked by gender. Men are mentioned more often than women, while student percentages are roughly equal. We don't expect to see representation that is directly proportional to student demographics in textbooks, but the distinctions we find provide empirical information for future research on how and why curricula shapes students. The most common named person in our text was Andrew Jackson, followed by Thomas Jefferson. The next 20-something most common people include many more politicians. Now, when we finally get to the 28th most common famous person, we finally get one woman, Eleanor Roosevelt. She's actually the only woman within the top 50 most common named people across our textbooks. This is consistent with previous research, where she also tended to be the most prominent woman in history. She's followed by Barack Obama, Martin Luther King, who are 2 of the 4 Black people in the top 50. The other Black individuals are Dred Scott at 42nd and Frederick Douglass at 44th. This just shows that the amount of space allotted for famous people featured in history textbooks tend to be reserved for a single demographic, with few exceptions. This plot shows that textbooks purchased in more conservative counties have fewer mentions of Black people. The x-axis is how democratic the counties are that purchase each textbook, and the y-axis is the percentage of people in textbooks that are categorized under some demographic. Each point is a textbook, and state-adopted textbooks are represented by triangles and tend to be purchased in more conservative counties. Similarly, textbooks that are purchased in more conservative counties also mention women less frequently. It was difficult for us to generate similar graphs for Hispanic and Latinx people since they showed up with low frequency across all books. Now we move on to our second research question. How are different groups and individuals described? For example, previous work showed that women occurred in less agentive and more passive verbs than men in Afghani history textbooks. We perform a similar analysis automatically. We use dependency parsing to extract adjectives and verbs associated with named people or common nouns referring to people. Relations we used include subjective verbs, adjectives, subjects of passive verbs, and direct objects. We use lexicon-based approaches on the extracted verbs and adjectives to look at their affective and social connotations. Lexicons are collections of words annotated with values corresponding to different dimensions of meaning. For example, in the case of adjectives, amazing has high valence, asleep has low arousal, and competitive has high dominance. We also applied a connotation frames lexicon on verbs. This lexicon contains annotations for agency, power, sentiment of verbs, and the slide shows a few examples. A low agency verb is obeys. For the verb applauds, the subject has low power while the object has high power. As for sentiment, suffered, the word suffered conveys positive sentiment onto its subject. These plots compare different categories of people and their power and agency connotation frame scores. The named entities category includes the top 100 named individuals. The other categories refer to categories of common nouns associated with people. Black people are the subject or object of verbs with less power and agency. These differences are largely due to the appearance of Black people in the context of slavery and racial oppression. For example, they are the object of high power verbs such as owned and barred. This finding contrasts with new historical research that emphasizes the power and agency of Black people in freeing themselves from enslavement and oppression. Named individuals have the highest agency and power because many perform actions related to politics. They tend to veto and initiate. We also found that Black people tend to be described with adjectives with low dominance, such as slave or inferior. Famous people are described with adjectives with high arousal, such as worried, victorious, and furious, while women are associated with verbs such as marry and help that indicate positive sentiment. This last example shows that it's important to examine the actual words involved in the calculation of a lexicon-based score, as lexicons may have labels that gloss over words' complex and context-dependent connotations. We also employed a word embedding method to look at how people are framed in textbooks. Word embeddings represent each word as a vector, which is calculated based on the words that co-occur with it in text. We examined the semantic similarity between terms for different genders and words related to work, home, and achievement. This plot shows the results for our word embedding-based analysis. The x-axis represents the average similarity of a particular word to man-related terms, and the y-axis represents the average similarity of a particular word to women-related terms. The colors show the category that the word belongs to. Home-related terms are more closely related to women with very high significance. Women are also more closely associated with work-related terms than men. This result is consistent with that of previous work, who found that the greatest number of references to women occur in the context of the workplace in recent US history curricula. Most but not all achievement-related terms are significantly closer to men, especially ones related to power and control. Understanding what topics textbooks focus on and how they're associated with groups of people is also an important part of understanding the perspective a textbook employs. The differently colored highlights show words that have high probability in these corresponding topics. So for example, this paragraph talks about reform, women's rights, religion, and marriage. We performed topic modeling with 50 topics at the sentence level across all books. In order to understand the prominence of different topics across textbooks, we choose pairs of topics and compare the ratio of their frequencies across textbooks. We compare the ratios of topic frequencies as opposed to raw frequencies of topics to account for noise arising from textbooks having different topic probabilities. We removed 3 books from the analysis that only cover half of US history. We identified different topics associated with social issues, such as slavery, and compare the prominence of this topic to the military topic. We find that books that are purchased in more Republican counties tend to talk more about the military than about slavery. We also find that besides one outlier, which is a book called Give Me Liberty, the ratio of these topics is similar across all books. We also apply this method to comparing the ratio of women-related topics to president-related topics. This figure shows that books purchased in more Democratic counties talk relatively more about women in comparison to presidents. Nonetheless, despite differences across books, all books talk more about presidents than women. To summarize, methods that we use to answer our first research question, which is how much are different groups of people mentioned, include co-ref resolution, named entity recognition, and WordNet. And we found that Latinx people are virtually absent from textbooks. Named people are mainly white men, and more diverse representation in books are in Democratic counties. We also use lexicons and connotation frames and semantic similarity to show that women are discussed in the context of marriage, home, and work, and Black people have low agency, power, and dominance in these narratives. Finally, we use topic modeling to show that social history topics tend to be more prominent in books bought in more Democratic counties, but similarities across books are greater than their differences. We have a toolkit for analyzing textbooks available on GitHub. And the work I presented today was conducted a few years ago, but I'm continuing this kind of research during my PhD. Professor David Bamman, who is my Berkeley advisor, and I are now working with Stanford linguists and social psychologists to analyze literature used in English language arts curriculum. We hope that this kind of work will shed light on best practices for culturally responsive education. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation, and feel free to ask any questions.
Thank you, Lucy. As a moderator, I'll take the liberty of the first question, and then I'll go through either the chat or the Q&A for any questions from the audience. So I was surprised that the difference between the Democrat and non-Democratic counties weren't huge. I mean, they were significant, but not huge. And I'm wondering if you have a sense, is the problem one of purchasing or one of the authors? So that is, are there books out there that are significantly more balanced in the representation of history? Or is the problem that the books simply aren't there and the purchasing is doing the best they can? So sort of where is the root of the problem, right? Is it with the Board of Education, or is it just with the material that's available?
That's a really great question. And it was something that was brought up a lot during like the aftermath of this project. It's just looking at what are the processes, what is the system involved in getting these books into children's hands. And so part of our current project is actually working with a school in Ohio, rather than like before we were just doing research independently as researchers, but now we're going to try to work with a school and actually talk to the teachers and be like, how do you decide what to give your students, who's deciding this? And we find that even in the textbook purchase data for Texas, there was this long tail of books that teachers were using to supplement the major textbooks that were being recommended by the Board of Education. And these books are just maybe like fiction that like tell certain stories and other types of work. So it seems like a pretty complicated process.
Okay, Maria has a question. How do you address the root of the problem that white men activities are better documented throughout history? So that is this inherently imbalanced, or is this simply representing the historical record? You know, I think is the question, if I may.
Yeah, that's a really good question as well. And we also talked about that. And I guess our biggest struggle is that among the authors on this paper, we have computer scientists, we have linguists, so we have the natural language processing side, we have an education researcher, but we don't have a historian. And I feel like historians would be able to answer this question in a much better way than I would be able to. But it was something that we were thinking about. It's like how to accurately capture history without erasing parts of it that are maybe like not as well known or something like that.
When we're done here, Lucy, would you please put the link to the GitHub in the chat for everybody, because somebody asked for it. I'm going to ask one more question because I haven't been told to stop asking questions yet. From Joyce, was this information provided to the Texas Board of Education, and did you get a response from them?
We didn't contact the Texas Board of Education. Oh, when I was giving this presentation, Texas and textbooks, oh man, saying that over and over. But yeah, we didn't actually talk to anyone in Texas. Well, we talked to teachers in Texas to get some feedback, but we didn't talk to anyone in the Board of Education. But I mean, this paper is out there. They wanted to find it. It's all written up. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I think I've gotten everybody. There's a couple of requests, Lucy, to share your slides. If you're willing, you can, there's an email and address in the chat that I'll let you connect with the member from the audience, okay?
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lucy. Okay, so I'm going to ask the wizard, is Susan next or am I next? I think I'm next. So Gary, would you turn over the control to me, please? And stop sharing or who's sharing the screen, please? Stop sharing, thank you. And would you please highlight my video? Hey, Gary, would you please make my video, spotlight my video?
You're ready to go.
Okay, it's not spotlighted on myself, so I don't know if it is. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my research. If you are not seeing me in spotlight mode, if you just click on the three dots in the top right, you can just say pin video and you'll see me full screen, and you should see my slides superimposed atop my video here. As I said at the beginning, I'm going to talk a little bit about deepfakes, but I'm going to talk about a larger issue here, which is trust and truth in the age of deepfakes. And the work I'm going to talk about is that a former PhD student who just graduated, her name is now Dr. Shruti Agrawal, and former postdoc, now Professor Sophie Nightingale at University of Lancaster in the UK. Before this mess of the pandemic, we have been dealing with misinformation. Of course, it's not new. Here are some fascinating statistics. 4%, this was a survey from 2015, 4% of American respondents believe that lizard people control society. That is not a euphemism. They literally believe that there are alien lizard bodies with a human shell that are controlling society. 7% believe that the moon landing was fake. 14% believe Bigfoot exists. 15% believe US government adds mind controlling technology to TV. Although if you watch TV, that's not really maybe that absurd. 19% believe that US government orchestrated the September 11th attack, and a whopping 37% believe that global warming is a hoax. And of the respondents, 50% believed in one conspiracy. By conspiracy, by the way, I define that it goes against all scientific evidence and is not based on any actual scientific evidence. And these are somewhat stark numbers. And it'd be easy to just laugh at people who believe lizard people control society. It'd be easy to laugh at people who think that the earth is flat. But it turns out that believing in conspiracy theories does something else. It erodes trust in government and institutions and experts and academics. And what that means is that when we get the global pandemic, the amount of misinformation that spreads can be extremely dangerous because we already don't trust institutions, government, and media. So in our own 2020 survey, we did a survey of 2,700 respondents around the world, North America, Central and South America, North Africa and Middle East, and Western Europe. And we wanted to look at the spread of misinformation across the globe, almost uniformly. Almost 1 in 5, believe that COVID stands for Chinese originated viral infectious disease. And you can say, who cares? Who cares if you got it wrong? But when you look at some of the anti-Asian hate crimes that have been happening here and elsewhere, you start wondering how much this type of misinformation is really causing problems. 21% believe that if you take large doses of vitamin C, it will protect you from COVID-19. 21%. And a whopping 22% believe that Bill Gates plans to use vaccines to implant tracking microchips. Here's something I'd like to ask these people, by the way, this is a bit of a tangent, is why would Bill Gates need to implant a tracking microchip into you? We have all voluntarily put the mother of all tracking devices, voluntarily, we strap this thing to our face 18 hours a day. Why, for the love of God, does somebody have to put a microchip into your neck? But here we are, 22% believe this. And by the way, I think it should be clear why this is important. If 22% of people believe the vaccine has a microchip, they're not going to get vaccinated. And this is the landscape facing us today, is from even 10 years ago, 5 years ago, there was this general widespread belief in conspiracies, which led to mistrust. Global pandemic hits where we need to trust our government officials, our scientific experts, and we don't. And now, on top of all of that mis and disinformation that is spreading around the world, we have a new phenomenon, the so-called deep fakes, which is, I call it, adding diesel fire to an already dumpster fire of online communities. If you navigate to that website right there, thispersondoesnotexist.com, you will see a picture of a person true to the domain name, doesn't exist. These are 6 images taken from there, and they were completely synthesized by a machine learning algorithm. And you can see they cross gender, they cross age and race with glasses and earrings, and highly, highly realistic images of people who don't exist. And in my favorite misapplication of this from a couple of years ago, a high school student bored during Christmas break, created a fake 2020 candidate for the US Congress and had that person verified by Twitter and verified by the Board of Elections. And the whole thing was done using an image of a person who doesn't exist and then some clever backstory and was able to get a Twitter verified account, which is not easy to get, and verified by the Board of Elections. Now, before we start talking about what the risk of these are, it's good to sort of know how these things are created. It turns out they're actually not that complicated. So here's how they work. How do you create an image of a person who doesn't exist? So your job is to generate an image. So we're going to start with an image with just some random pixels splatted down. That's what you see over here. And the generator's job, that guy right there, is to eventually turn this into an image of a person. And the way it has some help. What it does is every time it generates an image, here's my first image, it passes over to a discriminator. And the discriminator has access to a bunch of images of people, faces, just scraped from the internet, millions and millions of them. And what this thing does over here, it says, well, can I tell the difference between this image and these images over here of people? And the answer is yes. So it goes back to the generator and says, nope, that's not a person. Please try again. Modify some pixels, sends it back to the discriminator. And in this very, very tight loop over and over and over again, until it creates an image that when it sends it to the discriminator says, oh, that looks like a person. This is a so-called GAN, a generative adversarial network. Generative, because we're generating something. Adversarial, because we've pitted these two systems against each other. And network, because underneath both of these is a deep neural network. That's the underlying computational machinery that's doing the work. Now, the first thing you want to ask about these types of deep fakes are they compelling? I showed you these little thumbnails of them, but how good are they? And so what Sophie did in her first perceptual experiment is we got a bunch of images. So this first column are real people, second column is fake, third column is real, fourth column is fake. And you can see what we've done here is for each pair of images, it's the same gender and same race. And these have been matched with a very clever computational technique to make them as perceptually similar as possible. So you can see the similarity between them. And we had a total of 400 of these images, and we simply presented one at a time to a participant, 500 participants, in fact. And we just said, is this a synthesized person or not? And we explained, of course, what synthesized was. And here's their overall accuracy. So we had, in this case, 315 participants. This is their accuracy % correct, and this is the distribution of accuracies. So this is a so-called two alternative forced choice experiment, 2AFC, chance is 50%. That's that dashed line that you see here. You can see that that is, in fact, the median response here. Most people are guessing, and you get sort of the typical distribution that you would expect in these tasks. People basically, on average, can't tell the difference between a real and a synthesized person. Now, interestingly, when we train participants, when we tell them, here are some of the artifacts you can look for, and we give them more and more examples of these, we can do a little bit better. This is still chance at 50%, and now accuracy, median accuracy is at 60%, and with the same overall tail, with a different set of 170 participants, but still pretty bad. At 60%, you know, when you're looking at most stuff online, you're not going to be able to tell. And so we've hit this tipping point. And what's interesting here is that the interesting thing about this person does not exist is you can literally go to that website and all day long download these images of people who don't exist and create fraudulent profiles, fraudulent candidates for Congress, fake accounts on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Twitter, on wherever you want. And it adds to the ability to create more compelling fraud online. But things get more interesting when we go into the video domain. So in the video domain, what we can do is use the same GAN structure, generator, discriminator. And now our job is to not generate an image of a person who doesn't exist, but change a person's identity. So we're going to start with a frame or an image of, let's say, Jennifer Lawrence here, and we want to change her identity to be Steve Buscemi. And so again, the generator's job is to modify this image to make it look like a different person. The discriminator's job is a little bit different now. Its job is to say, is that Steve Buscemi or not? And it has now access to a bunch of images of Steve Buscemi. Generator takes this image, makes a modification, sends it to the discriminator. It says, is it Steve Buscemi? And does it have the overall appearance of the original video? So I don't want to generate an image of Steve Buscemi. There's plenty of those. So I want to preserve the head angle and the way the eye is shaped and the way the mouth is shaped, but just change the identity. This is called face swap deep fake. We're going to change the identity from the eyebrows to the chin. And this generator does this over and over and over and over again. And then it does it frame after frame after frame at between 24 and 30 frames per second for a full video. And when you do that enough time, you get something that looks like this.
expected Amy to win. So I just like, it was just, this was very truly surprising for me. Yeah, I was just really surprised.
Sheridan Watson from BuzzFeed right here. So you're a huge Bravo fan.
Oh,
Who
yes.
is your favorite and least favorite housewife of all cities?
My favorite is probably Lisa Vanderpump. My least favorite, I don't want to have to say. I mean, I don't want to have to say, because who knows when you're going to run into these people, you know?
Okay, I could watch that all day long. So highly compelling manipulation of a person's identity. And now imagine not doing that to Steve Buscemi and Jennifer Lawrence, but imagine doing that to President Biden or Vice President Harris or a CEO. And now you can see why these types of technologies add to the sophistication of disinformation attacks. So where are we seeing some of the concerns around the weaponization of deepfakes? So today, the single largest application of deepfakes is non-consensual intimate imagery or pornography. And the idea here is that you take an image almost always of women, you insert it into sexually explicit material, and then you distribute that online as a form of weaponization. It's being done against performers, it's being done against Human Rights Watch advocates, it's being done against journalists, it's being done against activists, it's being done against politicians, and in some cases, just people who attract unwanted attention. And it is a dangerous, yet another weaponization of technology against women. We have slowly started to see it be introduced into misinformation campaigns, because now it's not just, hey, Bill Gates wants to put a microchip into your neck. You see a video of Bill Gates saying that, and now you can start to see why these misinformation campaigns can start to be much weightier. For the last 20 years, I've been thinking about issues of digital forensics, how you authenticate digital images, digital audio, digital videos in courts of law. You can see why that can be very concerning around evidence tampering, body cameras, CCTV, citizen journalists. How do we know that the images and video that we see every day in courts of law and in high-profile cases have not been manipulated? And of course, on the national security front, on a daily basis, we are dealing with imagery from around the world. And if suddenly we enter this world where anything can be manipulated, we start to have some very concerning problems with how we reason about a very complex world around us. What are the challenges around this? Well, one of the biggest challenges is that with all the excitement of deep learning and machine learning and AI, there have come risks. And I don't think that should surprise anybody. And one of the things that makes my job so hard is that advances in deep learning are happening at such a phenomenal rate that we are constantly playing catch up. So as we develop techniques to detect the types of deep fakes that I showed to you, whether they're images or video or audio, 3 months later, there's a whole new threat vector that we have to worry about, and then we're playing catch up there. Now, the problem with these deep fakes and misinformation is not just that people lie or people create false information. It's this, it's that they can post it, and they can post it online, and it can spread at a scale and a speed that is unprecedented. If you've been paying attention for the last few days, you have seen the Facebook whistleblower on 60 Minutes and before the Senate talking about how social media algorithmically amplifies the most hateful, the most conspiratorial, the most outrageous content, because that is what engages us and maximizes profits. So not only can we now create this content, but we can distribute it at a scale to 3 billion people around the world that is unprecedented in history. And of course, we also have a hyper polarized public today, not just here in the US, but around the world. And that's the perfect storm. We can create false information. We have democratized access to publication, so we can spread it around the world. And then we have a hyper polarized public that is not only willing, but in fact eager to believe the worst in the people that they disagree with, and they continue to amplify and fan those flames. And here's the thing that really keeps me up at night, is this last one, the so-called liar's dividend. This is a great turn of a phrase from my friend and colleague Danielle Citron at the University of Virginia Law School. Liar's dividend says that if anything can be false, if anything can be manipulated, if any image, any video, any audio can be fake, nothing has to be real. And here's an indication of how fast the world has changed. 2015, then candidate Trump gets himself in a little bit of trouble with the Access Hollywood tape. And he said some pretty bad things about women, what he does to women. Anybody remember what he did in response? He apologized. He said, I'm sorry. He said that wasn't appropriate. 2 years later, this was in 2015, 2 years later, he was asked about the tape, and you know what he said? It's fake. Yeah, that's how fast the world has changed. And now, today, anytime there's an inconvenient fact, it's fake. Doesn't have to be real. We have a video of police brutality. It's fake. Didn't happen. We have a video of human rights violation. Fake. Didn't happen. We have a video of a politician saying something inappropriate. Fake. Didn't happen. And because of that polarization, it sort of works because the people on your side believe you and everybody else doesn't. And what happens to our society? What happens to our democracy when we enter this world where any piece of information we see online, any image, any video, any audio, anything we do can be, a shadow can be cast onto that, and it doesn't have to be true. I would argue these are existential threats to society and to democracy, and something that we have been very slow in getting our handle on. If you're interested in some more information about all of this, there's lots and lots of papers and op-eds and thought pieces on my website. It's at farid.berkeley.edu. And I'll ask somebody to drop that into the chat so you have it there as well. And I think we're okay on time. So if there's some questions in the Q&A, I'm going to go look at them right now. From Jack, if we have AI techniques to generate deepfake information, would it be possible for also to tackle this problem using AI, say having a publicly accessible site to tell users whether news is fake or not? Great question, Jack. So there's a little tension here with the forensic techniques that we develop. So if I develop a forensic technique that can detect deepfakes, and I put it out there for the public to use, well, guess who else gets access to it? My adversary. And they use that same AI technology to do what? Create better deepfakes. And so there's always been a little tension in my world when we develop these techniques. And for the most part, we do not, as a matter of fact, create a publicly accessible website where people can simply upload things, because then imagine you're the forger. It's your gift. You just take something, you test it, doesn't work, you try again. And so that's a little tricky, number one. Number two is the scale at which the internet is operating today is unimaginable. On YouTube, there are 500 hours of video uploaded every minute. There's 1 billion uploads to Facebook every single day. And so what that means is these forensic techniques can't operate at 90% accuracy or 99% accuracy or even 99.999% accuracy. They need to be out in the 1 in billion false alarm rate, and they're simply not there yet. So all the forensic techniques that we've just developed still need humans in the loop, and that means they don't scale. Number three, we have entered a world where fact checking isn't working anymore. The problem isn't that we have a lack of trusted information. The problem is people don't want to believe it, and that worries me. So I was about to add number four, but it's going to be the answer to the next question. So let me read the question. What do you think is the solution? It seems hopeless. Welcome to my world. Education doesn't solve it. I believe only top-down banning these tools sounds very undemocratic. So I agree, you can't ban the deepfakes. It doesn't work. So what are the solutions? I think there's a couple things we need to think about. So one is on the technology side, I don't think we can forensically analyze our way out of this problem. I don't think we can get into a world where we can simply analyze everything, but there's a different set of technologies called control capture or provenance. And the way they work is that instead of taking a photo with this device here and holding in my hand and simply uploading it, we take photos with a very special type of camera software and hardware that at the point of capture grabs the date and time, grabs the GPS location, grabs all the pixels, cryptographically signs everything, and that gets attached to the content. And then it follows that piece of content through its lifetime so it can always be authenticated originally. This is part of an initiative called the C2PA, the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authentication, being led by Adobe, being led by Microsoft, the BBC, and a number of other organizations of which I am part of. Now, I think that's part of the solution from the technology side. I think there has to be another part of the solution, which is from this means fixing the internet. Yes. So why are we having so much problems on social media today primarily? It's because there's no reason for them to behave better. There is no real fundamental liability for them spreading COVID misinformation, for them allowing hate groups to prosper, for allowing groups to organize the January 6th insurrection. So today on Capitol Hill and in Brussels, in the EU and the UK, there are various forms of legislation that are starting to tell the Facebooks and the YouTubes and the TikToks and the Twitters of the world, you need to take more responsibility for the harms that come from your platforms. And it is not easy. I've been working for years on various forms of regulation with our regulators, and it is a very delicate balance between preserving the open and free internet that we all want, but also recognizing that there are real harms that are happening to our society and democracy today, and trying to find that middle ground. I think we are converging on some middle ground that says that you are going to have some responsibility, not all responsibility, but some responsibility for what is starting to happen. Can we get access to the video across the presentation at a later date? Yeah. So this video will be available. We'll eventually put it online. Maria mentions the blockchain. That is being part of our consideration with the C2PA, that we put those signatures on the blockchain. There are technical limitations with the blockchain today that make it difficult to scale, which is a concern. So one of the things that we're thinking hard about is, how do you do this authentication in a decentralized way? What's great about the blockchain is that you don't have to trust one or two entities or me. You trust this sort of distributed immutable ledger. And that's I think, one exciting application of blockchain that we are currently looking at. Yes, Shanti put in a link to a recent video on CLTC where we explained the deepfake in a little bit more detail. There's also some talks on my website and some more technical and non-technical papers on my website. Thank you for those questions. I see Susan here, which is lovely to see you, Susan. So let me now turn over. I would like to introduce our next presenter, Susan Hildreth. Susan is a library consultant in Walnut Creek, just around the corner from us. She recently served as ALA treasurer and was a fellow with the Aspen Institute's Future of Public Libraries. She was the distinguished practitioner in residence at the University of Washington Ischool and led the Institute of Museum and Library Science Services from 2011 through 2015. She has held many library leadership positions, including California State Librarian and City Librarian for the Seattle and San Francisco Public Libraries. She has a BA from Syracuse University and MLS from the State University of New York at Albany, also one of my alma maters, and an MBA from Rutgers University. Susan joins us today to give an overview of the extraordinary career of the late Regina Minudri, who graduated from UC Berkeley School of Librarianship in 1959. And with that, I will hand it over to Susan.
Okay, well, thank you. And I certainly enjoyed your presentation as well with Jennifer Lawrence, Steve Buscemi. Was too much. So good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be here with you sharing the legacy of Regina Minudri, as she was a very influential colleague and mentor to me. I've looked a little bit at our participant list, and I see there are many colleagues of Regina's on the session today. So it would be great if you have memories to put those in the chat. I'm just really impressed with how many people are here who I know had their own deep personal relationships with Regina. So as we know, or I'm going to tell you, she was a champion for youth services, equity and diversity, and intellectual freedom during her entire career. And she was a believer in public libraries providing educational and social opportunities for all. As Harry mentioned, she did graduate from the Cal Berkeley Library Science program in 1959. Now, I love this picture of Regina that was provided by her wonderful life partner, Carol. And I can see her in her younger years, in the beginning of her career, just being ready to take on the world, which she did. She worked in a number of different positions in Bay Area public libraries. And one of her first jobs was in Mountain View Library, where she worked on a federal grant as a young adult librarian. And she developed a program where she loaned tools to fix cars to attract teen boys to the library. And I'm sure that that initiated her love of tool libraries. We'll talk about that in a minute. But just imagine working with teen boys to bring them into the library. And this was like in the 1960s when those things weren't happening, and she was making it happen. Also, she worked in the Alameda County Library for a number of years, and one of her big accomplishments was hiring young adult librarians in all 10 branches. Now, at that point in time, although we may think, oh yeah, there are young adult librarians everywhere, there's teen departments, there's special services for youth, this was not happening. She was an innovator and a leader in establishing those services. She also worked with seniors, and she provided services to jails and youth detention centers. So we know she was always working to provide services to some of our folks who needed them the most, and somewhat non-traditional library users. Okay, could we go to the next slide? I think somebody was going to be moving the slides. Okay, thank you. Back one up. There you go. Thank you very much. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of her really groundbreaking accomplishments. So of course, many of you, you may be living in Berkeley, or you're affiliated with Berkeley or close by, or you're zooming into Berkeley. She was appointed the Berkeley Public Library Director in 1977. And so she really did so much in that position in the wonderful community of Berkeley, with lots of community support. She established the first tool lending library in the United States. Now, we find tool lending libraries in various places around the US and maybe beyond the US now, but she established the first one, and it's still there and working very well. She also, during her tenure, created a citywide community information network, which this was all pre-internet. So I would love to see her listening to Harry's presentation and figuring out how she could make that work in the Berkeley Public Library. She was very committed to making sure folks in the community knew where they could get help. And the library was that facilitator and convener to do that. Now, just briefly, I'm sure most of you on this Zoom session, although some of the participants will remember 1978, when Prop 13 was passed here in California, and it decimated public library funding. And all kinds of funding. We've never really recovered from Prop 13 from my point of view. But as a result of that, Regina worked with her community and passed the first of its kind library tax, a dedicated tax for library services in the wake of Prop 13. So that was amazing. That created a model for many other public libraries to try to recover from Proposition 13. And she did that in 1980. And then also in 1988, she did something else. The tax had to be reauthorized in 1988, and that's often the case. Public taxes have a sunset and they have to be reauthorized every so often. Well, she made that funding stream so that it never had to be reauthorized. It didn't have a sunset. And that's why any of you folks who use the Berkeley Public Library today, you're benefiting from that great work. She became really a nationally known figure, and she was the California Library Association president in 1981, as well as the president of the American Library Association in 1986. So we'll go on to the next slide. And this is a picture that I really love, because this is a picture of Regina on the steps of one of the staircases in the San Francisco Public Library. So anyone that's been there might recognize this staircase. I think it's between the 5th and 6th floor, but I just love how she looks on that staircase. So she retired from Berkeley in 1994, but she was called out of her retirement in 1997 to serve as the interim city librarian for the San Francisco Public Library. So for those of you that may have been around the Bay Area for a while, when the new main library opened in San Francisco in, it was 1996, I believe, there was much furor about that building. Did we have enough books? Did we have too many books? There's a whole mythology of the main library that we could use another lecture on. But there were hard financial times and political challenges, and they brought her in, an esteemed and very seasoned library leader, to stabilize the budget. She hired a new management team, including me. I'll mention that in a minute. And she got $2.5 million for the first new branch library in 30 years. And she got that money from the famous Mayor Willie Brown. So just a quick little story about Regina and Willie Brown. So Willie Brown's first job as a lawyer was working for the San Francisco Public Defender. And Regina's mother, Molly Minudri, was the first female public defender in San Francisco's history. So just think about that. Regina's mother gave Willie his first professional job as a lawyer. So they had a very close connection there. And Mayor Brown always revered Regina and her leadership. Now, just my personal story, I don't want to talk too long, but Regina had the great faith in me to hire me as her deputy city librarian while she was serving in San Francisco. And I had the opportunity to work with her and learn from her. And it was one of the best experiences of my life, although it was far too short. Because in the spring of 1999, she suffered a catastrophic stroke. She recovered and she had an enjoyable life, but she never returned to work. And here's another quick story about Mayor Brown. So she, of course, was off work because of her illness. I was serving as the deputy or acting city librarian, but Mayor Brown wanted her to come back. And he gave her a number of months to recover. And finally, she knew she was not going to come back. And she had to, along with her wonderful life partner, Carol, had to drive into City Hall and meet face-to-face with Mayor Brown to say, sorry, Mayor Brown, I'm not coming back. But you got this gal, Susan Hildreth, over there. I think she can do the job. So she had a lot of confidence in me, and I hope that I was able to earn it. So I would just like to conclude by saying that, you know, Regina fought for diversity, pay equity, responsiveness to public needs for services. The UC Berkeley School of Information and all the students who are focused on all kinds of information and how it affects our society today, you should be proud of this alumna. She was a tireless fighter for intellectual freedom and meaningful service to all members of the communities that she served. Now, I don't know if we have time for questions. I know people have been adding some comments in the chat, and I just want to acknowledge that Regina was a leader in our field, and she will always be remembered, respected, and honored for her contribution to the people of California and to the nation.
Thank you, Susan.
Lots of great info in the chat there.
There's a nice note here. If people missed it, from Holly, it reads, I was a children's librarian in the Alameda County Free Public Library when Regina was the assistant director. She put the idea into my head that I could do a PhD, and eventually I did. That's very sweet.
Right, that's terrific. And then also Alan says, Gina recruited me to the public librarianship during the campaign to pass the tax measure to support the library. Many libraries pass similar taxes. That was one of her great legacies. Betsy says, I had the honor of working at both SFPL and Berkeley Public Library under Gina's leadership. She was amazingly savvy politically, as well as remembering everyone she worked with by name and face. So she was a wonderful person, and I was just so glad that I had an opportunity to work with her and get to know her. So thank you to everyone here at the Information School for giving us the opportunity to highlight one of your most honored and wonderful alumna.
Thank you, Susan, for that, and a very nice presentation about our alums. Let's go on to our closing. Before I conclude, I would like to take a moment to highlight the university leaders helping usher Berkeley through the 1918 pandemic. One of them was Benjamin Ida Wheeler, for whom the university's Planning Giving Society is named. More than 20% of philanthropic gifts to Berkeley come through planned giving. These generous donations are critical to helping us meet our mission as educators and scholars. And of course, we're incredibly grateful to the Wheelers and to all of those who consider this form of philanthropy. In closing, I want to give a special thanks to everyone supporting our school through Berkeley's Light the Way campaign. Your generosity is really valued to support our students of today and tomorrow. Our school takes pride in our roots at the Berkeley School of Librarianship, and we look forward to a future in-person and online gatherings in the coming year. Thanks for taking the time with us today. We look forward to celebrating again with you next year for our 104th anniversary. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of the day and wonderful weekend, and stay safe.